1997. That was the year Total Annihilation, one of the defining games of my childhood, was released. Developed by Cave Dog Entertainment, the game offered a real-time strategy experience that was way ahead of its time, featuring 3D terrain and units, physics-based combat, and a scale that wasn't quite like anything else out there. You have to remember, StarCraft 1, which would go on to become massively popular, didn't release until a full year later in December of 1998. Total Annihilation was simply incredible, and elementary school me put an ungodly amount of time into it. I remember my preferred strategy at the time was to turtle like my life depended on it and build up massive batteries of Big Berthas and just shell the AI into submission. Now, over the years, there have been multiple games that could be considered spiritual successors to Total Annihilation, some even involving devs that were directly involved in the original project, the most noteworthy being Supreme Commander and Planetary Annihilation. Both are great games in my opinion that I did play back in the day, but for some reason, they never really hooked me, at least not in the same way that the original game had way back then. But there's another game out there, one that doesn't involve any of the original devs, but instead is being worked on entirely by fans, and it may very well be the truest successor to Total Annihilation that we've ever seen. Oh, and it's 100% free to download and play, with no microtransactions or bullshit of any kind. This is Beyond All Reason, an open source real-time strategy game. If you were ever a fan of Total Annihilation, or just RTSs in general for that matter, it is an absolute must play. And I know I just referred to it as a successor to Total Annihilation earlier, but I don't even know if that's the right term. The game is not only a modern recreation that stays incredibly true to the roots of Total Annihilation, but it's a straight up upgrade. The original formula is here and added to in a way that expands upon the game, while at the same time preserving those feelings I experienced when playing the original all those years back. You've got your two different unique factions available to play as, different unit types like bots, vehicles, aircraft, etc., all with their own strengths and weaknesses, Tech 2 units that are even more powerful, static emplacements, including those super long range weapons that can be used to bombard opponents. The economy is set up basically the same way, with metal being the most limited resource on the map, forcing players to either expand or die. It's all here, and trust me when I say that the gameplay is addictive, and honestly, pretty challenging. I wouldn't describe myself as a quote-unquote RTS guy. My brain just has a real hard time managing both the economy and micromanagement aspects of games like this simultaneously, but it is something that as I've played more and more, I've started to adjust to a little. But before we get too much further into this, keep in mind, the game is constantly receiving updates, which you can view in the devlog on the main site, so it isn't really technically a finished product at this point in time, but I'll tell you, they could have fooled me because it certainly plays like one. Compared to the AI of the original game, this is light years ahead, which I'm sure a part of me feeling that way is because I'm a brand new player, but currently the AI on higher difficulties is still a challenge. It's fully configurable when you're setting up a skirmish match, with the so-called Barbarian AI being available in 4 different difficulty options: easy, medium, hard balanced, and hard aggressive. There are also some additional AI options as well, called Simple AI, that are, well, much simpler to go up against, providing a bit more of a relaxed, casual experience. You'll also notice here that there are 2 additional choices that are called Scavenger's Defense and Raptor's Defense. These enable sort of separate game modes that are independent of the standard experience you're familiar with, and are almost like a horde defense mode, where you and your team, if you're on one, work to hold off against and defeat the AI. Personally, I'm more a fan of the standard game mode, but I could definitely see this being some good fun if you're looking for a co-op experience with your buddies. And in addition to the standard skirmish mode, where you're free to basically set up and configure matches however you want, the game also features a scenarios mode that's comprised of a set number of various challenges to play through at various difficulties. These vary quite a bit, and with an adjustable difficulty setting, they can definitely offer quite a challenge, especially if you're a new player. But with that said, let's move on to the feel and flow of gameplay and what it's actually like in Bar, or at least what my experience has been with it so far. To start off, as mentioned before, the game has two factions, the Armada and Cortex. From both what I've read online and what I've experienced so far, they seem to be very well balanced, with neither side possessing anything that could be considered a huge advantage over the other. That's not to say they're exactly the same though. They each possess their own unique units, and although many fulfill similar roles, they're anything but copy and pastes of one another. For just a brief overview of each, we'll rip some info straight from the Beyond All Reason site. Armada tends to rely more on mobility, versatility, and stealth, focusing more on direct firepower than indirect artillery. They're somewhat better suited to open battlefields due to their mobility advantages, with their strength on land being somewhat weighted towards vehicles once they reach Tech 2. Cortex, on the other hand, trades that mobility for sheer firepower, tough units, and conventional artillery. They tend to specialize more in siege warfare, using artillery to crush enemies from a distance before walking in to finish them off with powerful Tech 2 bots. Due to my natural inclination to turtle and love of long-range artillery, I found myself drawn towards Cortex, but really both sides are strong in their own rights. Turtling though, I quickly found out that that isn't really a winning strategy. Games start off by choosing your commander's starting location, which is limited to a certain zone on your side of the map. I don't think there would ever be a reason to not start right next to a cluster of metal deposits, since resource gathering and economy management is really the backbone of the game. After constructing your first one or two metal extractors, the next thing to do is get some energy production going. The second resource of the game, you actually have a couple of options for generating this early on: solar generators or wind turbines. Your choice here is going to depend on the map's wind speed, which can be seen in the upper portion of the screen. At speeds of 8 or higher, wind turbines are generally the better choice here, although they are considerably more vulnerable if they happen to fall under fire. Once the start of your economy is underway, it's time to start producing units. Your choice here will vary based on a number of factors, but you can start off with anything you like. Typically, I found myself starting off with either bots or vehicles, but nothing's stopping you from starting off with aircraft or walking off into the water to start up a navy. This is where the game really starts to open up as more and more options become available to you. Want to focus on pumping out combat units as fast as possible to focus on early aggression, bolster your own defenses to protect against attacks from your opponent, or focus on quickly expanding to secure metal deposits across the map. The choices are really endless, and the longer the game goes on, the more variables there are to consider, because you have to remember that your opponent, even if it is just an AI, isn't going to be just sitting around idle. They'll actively work to counter you, doing things like harassing unprotected metal extractors, sending units through weak points in your defense line, and will just generally be a pain in the ass unless you can really lock them down, like on maps with hard choke points, for example. And as much as I love my static defense emplacements, I found that leaning too heavily into them can definitely be taken advantage of, since a lot of the time enemies can simply just play around them or outrange them and destroy them without much trouble. Obviously there are exceptions to this, and I do still tend to find myself playing rather defensively, but units really are incredibly powerful, mostly for the fact that they're mobile, which is a huge advantage. Eventually, after you've hopefully expanded and secured a decent economy for yourself, you'll have the option to move into Tech 2. These units and buildings, both defensive and economy-focused ones, are vastly superior to their Tech 1 counterparts, to the point where, if you can get into this tier before your opponent, you can absolutely decimate them. Heavy assault tanks, mobile long-range artillery, battleships, hell, there's even an additional building you can create that lets you craft experimental Tech 3 units, which are powerful enough to wipe out entire armies on their own if you have the resources to craft them. Or there's always a good old-fashioned nuke if you're just looking to end things quickly.
Destroyed.
The options really are endless, with each faction having nearly 200 units at their disposal, and there's no saying that this number won't increase as the game continues development. If you're in any way interested, I highly recommend checking out Beyond All Reason. It's free, with no strings attached, so you really have nothing to lose. And just FYI, the game does have a fairly active multiplayer scene, it's just that I haven't really messed with it too much yet due to my overall newness, but there are definitely games to be had once your skills are up to the challenge. Let me know your thoughts on Beyond All Reason down below, and as always, thanks for watching. Until next time.